The story kicks off in a church where a young man named Sakuya finds himself completely overwhelmed by the chaotic affection of a nun named Lamia. To understand how things escalated to this point, the clock winds back a bit. The two are alone in the sanctuary when she suddenly acts completely out of character, closing the distance between them and boldly asking him to be in a relationship. He immediately panics and pushes her away, reminding her that romantic entanglements are strictly forbidden for someone in her position. However, she brushes off his concerns, claiming she no longer needs to serve the divine and is entirely free to pursue romance. Having been taken in by her 10 years ago as an orphan, he holds a deep admiration for her kindness. Still, his feelings have always been purely familial, making this sudden confession incredibly shocking. While trying to keep his distance, he spots something hilarious. She has a cheat sheet for her confession scribbled directly on her hand. Realizing that she is completely frozen with nerves and isn't naturally this pushy, his worry melts into a sense of understanding. Later, at the orphanage, she pays him a visit while wearing a rather distracting and inappropriate outfit. Trying to keep things PG, he hastily tosses a t-shirt her way and begs her to cover up. She playfully pouts, wondering if she lacks charm, but he firmly clarifies that she just caught him off guard. He reiterates his deep, familial love for her, viewing her as an older sister rather than a romantic interest. Hoping to soften the blow, he blushes and admits that he still finds her incredibly pretty. That single compliment is all it takes to send her over the edge. She drops to the ground, shaking with joy and screaming declarations of love, even going as far as getting a comical nosebleed. Trying to reel in the chaos, he solemnly promises that someday he will become a mature man, capable of properly protecting her. Completely missing the profound nature of his vow, she enthusiastically declares that she is ready for him right this second. Realizing she is not listening to a word he is saying, he simply sighs in defeat as she confidently announces her new mission: to relentlessly pursue him until he finally accepts her confession. Feeling a bit guilty, he asks if it is truly fair for him to keep her waiting while knowing her feelings. She warmly reassures him, admitting that her crush is entirely for her own ego, and that having even a sliver of a chance is enough to make her the happiest woman alive. With her declaration made, she joyfully sprints out of the room, leaving the flustered young man muttering to himself about how dangerously charming she can be. Sometime later, he is hard at work in the library, complaining about his stiff shoulders. Right on cue, she materializes behind her favorite cutie pie, eagerly offering to give him a soothing massage. When she eagerly proposes a compromise to their situation, Sakuya immediately shuts her down, reminding her that crossing that line is strictly forbidden. Attempting to push past his defenses, Lamia tries to properly confess her feelings but gets too flustered to even finish her sentence. Suddenly, her intense embarrassment morphs into dramatic despair. Convinced that she is completely pathetic and lacks any real charm, she throws herself into a nearby rubbish bin to hide from the world. Amused but sympathetic, he breaks the silence to reassure her. He declares that she is the most beautiful person in the world and blames his own stubbornness for the rejection. Instantly cured of her insecurities, she happily pops out of the trash, leaving him slightly bewildered by her lightning-fast recovery. Later that night in their shared room, she boldly invites him to share a bed. He firmly declines, opting to sleep in his own separate bed across the room. Despite his outward rejections, he secretly admires her genuine feelings. He finds her bashful yet forward nature endearing and respects her deeply from the bottom of his heart. The next morning, she cheerfully cooks a meal and asks him to taste it. He is fully prepared to compliment her cooking until he notices her highly questionable and absurdly revealing choice of morning attire. Panicking, he loudly protests her outfit, but she playfully ignores his complaints and tries to force the silly apron onto him instead, turning the kitchen into a chaotic wrestling match. Amidst the daily madness, she once again suggests that they start officially dating. This time, his rejection carries a much heavier weight. He explains that they simply cannot afford to think about romance when their very survival is uncertain. Although their food inventory is temporarily secure, he stresses that they need to focus on their grim reality, leaving her to sadly wonder if they even have a future. Pushing aside his own guilt, he heads outside to scout the area, firmly believing that this is absolutely no time to be fooling around. As he steps outside, the reason for his seriousness becomes terrifyingly clear. The city lies in complete and utter ruin, devoid of all life. He grimly recalls the catastrophic day the world crumbled, when sparks rained from the sky, massive icicles erupted from the earth, and the entire population vanished into blinding light. With no hospitals, no police, and their food supplies slowly dwindling, they are the last two people left on Earth. In a shattered world, romance is a luxury they simply cannot afford. While exploring the desolate outside world, she relentlessly promises to keep pursuing him. He acknowledges her determination, but gently reminds her that their main priority must be searching for any other living survivors. Undeterred by the apocalyptic landscape, she stubbornly repeats her romantic vow. Resigned to her endless energy, he simply agrees, and together the two of them continue to navigate their ruined world. In 2036, a mysterious light shines across the globe, causing most of humanity to vanish and leaving the environment horizontally and vertically distorted. The reason behind this near-extinction event remains completely unknown. The only thing clear to Sakuya is that the sole person left living with him is hopelessly in love with him. Before he can dwell on their ruined world, Lamia interrupts his thoughts, playfully trying to cheer him up while wearing a silly paper bag over her head. After taking it off, she teases him about his panicked reactions and asks if he is finally ready to fall for her. He quickly looks away, insisting that his familial feelings will not change so easily. Having never been in love before, her relentless advances just leave his heart pounding. Despite the emptiness of their new reality, the two continue to survive together. During mealtime, she serves the food, but he is exasperated to find "I love you" written directly into his dish. He begs her to leave their food out of her romantic antics, prompting her to playfully stick her tongue out before they pray over their meal. 3 months have already passed since the cataclysm. While reading, he calculates their grim odds of survival. Although solar panels provide electricity, their gas and running water are completely gone. Their non-perishable food is holding up for now, but fresh ingredients are scarce, meaning starvation is a real threat by next year. Even with sunlight, there is no guarantee their garden vegetables will yield a harvest, causing his anxiety to skyrocket. Noticing his distress, she pitches a ridiculous idea to cheer him up, playing a game where they pretend to be desperately in love. He immediately rejects the notion, completely immune to her innocent puppy dog eyes. When he demands she say something else, she responds by silently extending a hand and repeatedly poking him. Flustered, he tries to push her away but accidentally bumps into her chest. Instead of getting mad, she blushes heavily and jokingly calls him a pervert. Completely mortified by the accidental touch, he aggressively freaks out, grabbing a bucket of equipment and fleeing to distract himself from the thoroughly awkward situation. When she teasingly asks if he wants to get to know her better, he immediately deflects and announces he is heading to the field. Amused, she points out his obvious embarrassment. Flustered by her carefree attitude, he begs her to moderate her relentless advances before sprinting away as fast as he can. Watching him flee, she finds herself completely obsessed with his adorable reactions. Lying on the ground, she seriously contemplates how to win his heart, wishing she had a more charming way to approach him. Despite his stubbornness, she absolutely adores that cautious side of his personality. Feeling a bit flustered herself, she decides to cool off by drawing a warm, solar-powered bath. While relaxing in the water, she happily reflects on their dynamic, knowing she has to keep poking fun at him to get any genuine reaction out of him. Later, the two sit down to enjoy a homemade meal. She enthusiastically praises the delicious food before suddenly growing quiet. When he asks what is wrong, she playfully boasts about acquiring a new tolerance for his accidental physical affection. He quickly scolds her for making such bold jokes, wondering aloud how she manages to stay so relentlessly optimistic in a ruined world. Shrugging off the gloom, she casually claims that since God is clearly no longer watching over them, she is completely free to live exactly how she wants. He questions if a former church sister should really be saying such blasphemous things, but she happily dismisses his concern, chalking it up to her own brand of survival positivity. To prove her point, she eagerly extends her spoon to feed him. He practically leaps backward in refusal, but she stubbornly insists he open his mouth. Despite the desolate state of the earth, being trapped in this apocalypse is no fetter for her. As long as she has Sakuya by her side, she is ready to bravely face whatever tomorrow brings. One day, Lamia violently slams the door open, nearly giving Sakuya a heart attack. Flustered and blushing, she stammers out a frantic confession. She thinks she is getting fatter. Unamused, he stares at her in absolute exasperation, wondering if she has completely lost her mind. Realizing her mistake, she quickly pivots, revealing the actual reason for her excitement, a camcorder she scavenged. They set up the device and review the footage, spotting a silhouette moving in a window a kilometer away. Thrilled by the prospect of finding other survivors to help share their daily labor, he eagerly analyzes the video. However, his excitement quickly evaporates when he notices the figure's bizarrely long neck, suggesting it might not be human at all. Terrified by the creepy implication, she immediately protests, and they temporarily abandon their rescue mission. Later, she requests his presence outside the bathroom to stand guard while she washes up. Standing rigidly on the other side of the thin curtain, his usually disciplined mind begins to race, making the situation incredibly awkward. When he hears a strange noise and nervously asks her about it, she playfully calls him a weirdo before teasing him with some undeniably naughty remarks. Completely flustered and fighting his own overactive imagination, he forcefully slaps his own cheeks to regain his focus and apologizes to the air. By the time she finishes and steps out, he is aggressively pretending to study, resulting in a hilariously tense atmosphere as she pouts about his total lack of tact. Despite their previous fears, the next day, the pair gears up to investigate the strange silhouette. Trying to act brave, she completely over-prepares by wearing a makeshift suit of heavy armor. As they silently enter the eerily quiet building, he reflects on the apocalypse, remembering how every living creature vanished into light. Knowing they desperately need to find other humans to survive, he pushes his fears aside. Suddenly, a strange sound echoes from one of the rooms ahead. As the noise grows into a terrifying roar, he readies himself, whispering for her to prepare her weapon so they can fight together. However, upon hearing a loud metallic clang behind him, he turns around only to discover that his heavily armored companion has already fainted out of pure terror, leaving him entirely on his own as the roaring continues. Left completely alone to face the unknown threat, Sakuya bravely charges down the hall, demanding the intruder reveal itself. However, he stops dead in his tracks when the terrifying roar turns out to be the cheerful greeting of a cute, cat-like service robot from a local family restaurant. The little machine happily explains that its loud noises were simply the result of an excited malfunction. Once Lamia finally regains consciousness, the pair quickly realizes the robot possesses self-awareness and recharges via solar power, much like their own setup. Unfortunately, their hopes are momentarily crushed when the machine confirms it has not seen a single human since the world was destroyed. Seeing their sudden despair, the robot cheerfully tries to comfort them by offering freshly made popcorn and a bizarre collection of novelty items, including 3D glasses and fake mustaches. While she happily munches on the snack, he redirects the conversation, desperately asking if the machine has any actual leads. After a moment of processing, the robot reveals a massive breakthrough. The building's rooftop surveillance camera is still functioning and stores a month's worth of offline footage. Realizing they can use this business-grade system to scan for distant survivors and observe the outside world, he eagerly asks to see the data. The robot happily complies, leading the way to the security room. As they walk down the quiet halls together, she gently brushes her fingers against his hand. When he looks over, she shyly admits that seeing him bravely step up to protect her earlier made her fall even deeper in love with him. Blushing, he quietly thanks her, secretly wondering to himself if this apocalyptic journey will actually end in genuine romance after all. Their heartfelt moment is abruptly interrupted when their robotic guide announces their arrival at the monitor room. The machine quickly boots up the system, projecting the stored data onto the main screen. Sitting before the glowing monitors, his stomach churns with uneasy anticipation as the screening finally begins, hoping the footage will provide the answers they so desperately need. Taking in the nice lighting and ambiance of the screening room, Sakuya feels a brief wave of nostalgia for their original world. The robot announces that the system will take a moment to boot up. Seizing the opportunity of the dimly lit room, Lamia enthusiastically attempts to flirt with him, completely ignoring the serious situation. He quickly rejects her advances, accusing her of ruining the atmosphere. Undeterred, she defends her actions, proudly revealing that she is following a romance manual to make him fall in love. Aghast that she is taking dating advice from a questionable book in the middle of an apocalypse, he aggressively scolds her. Their bickering is suddenly cut short when the robot strictly shushes them, reminding the embarrassed pair to follow proper theater etiquette. With quiet restored, the machine plays the live feed. The footage boasts remarkable resolution, offering a sweeping view of the distant landscape that their ground-level church could never provide. Thrilled by the potential of finding other survivors, he asked the robot to rewind the recording to a month ago, exactly 2 months after the world was destroyed. The machine complies, fast-forwarding through the stored data. He watches the screen with bated breath, desperately praying for even a single trace of life to appear. However, as the days and nights blur together on the monitor, the results are devastatingly empty. There are no humans, no animals, and no signs of movement. While he sinks into disappointment, she watches the empty screen with a secret sense of relief, entirely unbothered by the lack of survivors as long as she has him by her side. While Lamia is perfectly content with their isolation, the empty footage utterly crushes Sakuya. Trying to mask his heartbreak, he forces a smile and casually brushes off the disappointing results. Deep down, however, he had desperately clung to the hope of finding a thriving community far away. Memories of playing video games with his friends flashed through his mind, sharply contrasting with the reality of their destroyed home. He mentally berates himself for being so terribly naive, acknowledging that he should have accepted the world's desolate state when they found no traces of life earlier. Determined to push forward, he suggests they ask the robot for supplies to solve their immediate food security problems. He optimistically claims they will repay the debt once the world returns to normal. But even as the words leave his mouth, a heavy skepticism settles over him. Recognizing his silent struggle, she thoughtfully invents an excuse to give him space. She suddenly turns away, claiming the shock of the empty footage has moved her to tears and requesting 10 minutes of privacy. In reality, she isn't shedding a single tear. She is simply providing a clever cover for him to freely weep without feeling embarrassed. Grateful for her unspoken kindness, he accepts the excuse and lets his own tears fall. As the reality of their 3-month fruitless search sets in, the absolute certainty that they are the only 2 humans left becomes undeniable. 10 minutes later, he heads to the washroom to clean his face. He mutters to himself, feeling incredibly pathetic for crying and making the situation awkward. Wanting to reassure her that he is perfectly fine, he completely changes his demeanor. He throws the theater door open with forced energetic confidence, loudly announcing his cheerful return. However, the room appears empty. Before he can process her disappearance, she gently embraces him from behind. Startled, he loudly questions her actions. She softly explains that she knew he was pushing himself too hard and simply wanted to calm him down. She admits she initially considered using his vulnerability to make him fall in love with her, but she couldn't bring herself to be dishonest with the person she cherishes. Extending a comforting hand, she offers her deepest sympathy, promising that no matter how uneasy he feels, she will always be right there by his side. Holding his hand, Lamia promises to stay by his side forever, even in a world abandoned by God. Later that night, as Sakuya lies in bed, the heavy realization sets in that their home will never return to normal. He begins to feel that holding on to hope is entirely useless. While he quietly spirals into these dark thoughts, she peeks into the room to check on him. Seeing her there fills him with profound gratitude. From the bottom of his heart, he realizes that her presence is the only thing giving him the strength to continue on. The next morning, she playfully offers to spoil him whenever he feels down. Brushing his hair back, he accepts her comfort but firmly states he won't hold back his annoyance at her constant romantic advances. Despite his exasperation, he secretly ponders his shifting feelings. While he still views her strictly as family, the thought of eventually crossing that line quietly lingers in his mind. Their quiet moment is abruptly interrupted when Nayata suddenly alerts them to a new detail in the restored footage. Pointing to a recording from 2 days ago, it highlights a faint trail of smoke in the distance. Instantly on high alert, he orders it to zoom in. Having not seen a single wisp of smoke in the past 3 months, he desperately prays that the fire belongs to another human survivor. However, as the image enlarges, his hopes are dashed. The screen only reveals 2 other identical service robots gathered around a bonfire. Recognizing the machines as its cousins, Nayata rejoices that they are alive. Completely disappointed by the lack of humans, he lets out a heavy sigh. However, Nayata quickly points out a crucial detail. Table-setting robots are strictly programmed to never touch fire for safety reasons, meaning it had to use a microwave to make their popcorn earlier. The realization hits him like a lightning bolt. If the robots cannot start a fire, a human survivor must have lit the bonfire for them. Staring at the screen, a renewed sense of hope washes over him, as he realizes they are clearly not alone in this ruined world. Lamia excitedly discovers a brand new blanket, which Sakuya eagerly agrees to take home. Still reeling from the footage, he marvels at the fact that they have finally found traces of life after 3 months. He asks Nayata to zoom in further, but the robot explains it is impossible, confirming that the video is from 2 days ago and the mysterious group has since moved on. Certain that a human must be traveling with those robots to start the fire, his hopes soar. Hoping to attract any nearby survivors, she manages to turn on the building's exterior illumination, lighting up the entire structure. He thanks her, completely mesmerized and blushing at her bright smile. Deciding they need to properly gather food and supplies before embarking on a rough expedition, they agree to head back home. They leave the robot behind in the building, as it is a convenient place for it to recharge, but hand over a communication device so it can call them if it ever feels lonely. During the long drive back, she takes the wheel. Glancing at her in the driver's seat, he suddenly realizes he is intensely conscious of her as a woman for the very first time. He blushes heavily, unsure if his mind is just playing tricks on him. Upon returning to the relaxing safety of the church, she notices him spacing out and playfully calls his name, nearly making him jump out of his skin. Blaming his distraction on exhaustion, he desperately tries to act casual. To shift the awkward mood, they begin analyzing the cause of the world's destruction. She jokingly suggests a giant monster engulfed everyone in light, which successfully eases his lingering nervousness. In reality, he suspects a military weapon or an alien invasion. However, the existence of their new robotic friend complicates things. Since the service robot never possessed a personality AI before the apocalypse, he wonders if a rogue system or some fantastical phenomenon suddenly granted machines consciousness. While he is lost in his deep, serious thoughts about the state of the world, she suddenly hugs him tightly from behind, quietly admitting that she is scared. Her sudden closeness sends his heart into overdrive. Panicking that the proximity feels a little too nice, he aggressively turns around to push her away, but accidentally ends up planting a kiss squarely on her cheek. The accidental affection leaves them both completely freaked out, briefly abandoning all thoughts of their ruined world as they process the massive romantic leap.
Here I am,